Welcome back, guys. Have you noticed the oddity that is Lake Mabe? While not officially named in the game, it is found on Mabe Prairie east of Lookout Landing. It might seem simple, tranquil, and peaceful on the surface. It's pretty good for a man-made lake that came into existence within a few years, isn't it? That's right. This lake didn't exist in Breath of the Wild. Despite this lake being new, the depths show the area under it being completely filled with rock. Oh, but there is much more to this than the developers messing up when it came to the underworld topography again. Sit back and relax while I take you through my findings. I assure you, it is worth the watch. Let's get started. Part 1. Mabe Lake. Let's start with the basics. Mabe Lake is a location east of Castle Town, north of Mabe Prairie, aka the Ranch Ruins. In Breath of the Wild, the location was a hillside with a light traveling path alongside it, along with a few wandering guardians patrolling the area. I wouldn't exactly call it a safe path, but perhaps this walking path developed as a way to avoid some of the more dangerous parts of the field. Anyhow, in Tears of the Kingdom, the area has been completely dug up and filled in with water, making a large lake. There is some sky debris nearby with some constructs on it. But when we look at the depths, we can see that this area is filled with a giant rock wall. Given that the depths are ancient, and that this lake was seemingly man-made within the last 6 or so years, it raises a curious question as to why this rock wall is here. It could be an indication that the depths changed to reflect the current state of the surface, a concept that I am very much against, but I can't rule it out. To me, this looks like a developer's mistake, but there is much more going on here than we might think. Allow me to continue. Why a lake was put here between the games isn't exactly clear. However, upon investigation, this is in fact the same lake that Link and Zelda fall into during the ending. We can trace the location exactly here, complete with Death Mountain visible, a Kala Citadel in the background, and this large rock spike. We can also see the sky debris from those constructs I mentioned earlier, but they seem to be missing during the ending. I suppose getting jumped by them really would have spoiled the moment, don't you agree? Coming to this location in Breath of the Wild reveals a couple of interesting things. The first of which is that there is a lot of ground here that would have had to have been dug up in order to make the lake. I don't think that the Hylians in a state of rebuilding would randomly want to make a lake given how much rebuilding there was to do. Another thing that we see when looking into the distance is that this spike on Death Mountain isn't here. It was a curious feature I felt the need to investigate. It turns out though, that this spike has a lower render priority than a Kala Citadel, and that when you get to this point on the map, it will then flicker into view. I guess Tears of the Kingdom has better render distances, or reorganized the priority of objects to render in. Also in Tears of the Kingdom, the spike has some sky debris on it. The biggest parts of this mystery are why the lake was dug, and why the borders of the lake perfectly match up with the wall in the depths. I'm happy to say I have some answers for both, so let's start with why the Hylians decided to dig a lake. Before we get to that though, are you enjoying the video? If so, would you consider giving it a like and subscribing to the channel for future content? You know how all this YouTube stuff works, and how a higher subscription count is vital to a channel's growth. I put out a video every week, and hopefully by the end of this one, I will have earned your subscription. Now, let's move on. Part 2. Digging the Lake. It's possible that something was buried here. We know that the Zonai excavation team was looking for ruins, and maybe there was something here that alerted them to this location. However, I don't think it was anything quite so grand. I think that the Hylians just needed a bunch of dirt for a different project, and this location was convenient because it was centrally located. From it, they would have easy access to move dirt in carts along the main road. For example, it could have been used to help with the reconstruction of Castletown. I think that they had a different purpose in mind though. You see, inside of Hyrule Castle itself, there was something that needed to be cleaned up, a hole that needed to be filled. I am talking about the Astral Observatory. I do not know why the Sheikah technology was ripped out and disposed of. The Guardians, turrets, and flying weapons all make sense of course. Fear of them being turned on the kingdom again is completely legitimate. Other non-aggressive pieces of technology raise more questions. Why remove the towers? They were providing advanced imaging of the land, something that would surely have been useful to the kingdom. The shrines, while bright and annoying, weren't really harming anything now, were they? The giant pillars are still a mystery as to what exactly they were doing. As for the astral observatory itself, it seems to have been used for tracking star locations, with a 360-degree view of the kingdom built into its walls. Perhaps the observatory had a deeper purpose. In the past, I've speculated about its use to extract purified energy from the Demon King, which, I would remind you, is about 1,000 or so meters directly below it. It seems to me that the astral observatory could have been dispersing power to other structures through those large pillars. Sadly, none of this is actually stated in-game anywhere. For now, what we do know is that the observatory's wall, which we can see in the secret passage in the library, has been completely replaced with rock. Curiously, when you try to climb on this replaced surface, Link is unable to, despite it looking exactly like the neighboring rock. When we look at the entrance to the Astral Observatory in the throne room, we see that it has been completely filled in with dirt. The Astral Observatory was huge. The entire calamity fell down into it, and on the inside, it billows out into a much wider area. I've mapped it out so we can see just how big it is compared to the castle in Tears of the Kingdom, as well as to how it would fit inside of the Hyrule Pillar, as I am calling it. And need I remind you, that pillar extends all the way to the bottom of Hyrule Castle Chasm. It seems to me that they needed a lot of dirt to fill this in, and so digging into a nearby location could have been done. Perhaps they didn't want to disturb the grounds of the castle any further for various reasons. As such, they may have chosen to create a lake a short distance away from the foundation, and then brought the dirt to the castle one cart at a time. Slowly but surely they would have filled in the whole of the observatory. Anyhow, this explanation for why they would dig the lake is pretty clean. I like it. However, that doesn't explain the other mystery, the rock wall in the depths. Part 3. Below the Lake. To explain the stone below the lake, I must first talk about another nearby lake, the Bottomless Pond. This is actually the first body of water you are designed to land into on the surface. And if you gaze down into it, it does indeed appear to be bottomless. There are a couple of other spots like this around Hyrule. For example, Skull Lake over in Akala. If we look at the depths, we can see that these areas are inaccessible on the map, which indicates that they would be solid rock. Well, perhaps looks can be deceiving. Consider this. The water from the bottomless pond could be flowing down into the depths, with a hole that is so deep that over time it has gradually filled up from the rain. As such, the bottomless pond may seem bottomless because it basically is. Let's go a step further. Consider that the nearby wetlands and Zora's domain itself are all sitting on a huge reservoir of water deep underground, deeper than even the depths. That the pressure from this underground source could be pushing water up into these channels, and that pressure would equalize around the surface. In effect, this would mean the top of the bottomless pond is merely one exit from a deep underground system. Intriguing, isn't it? I admit that there isn't much evidence to support this body of water existing. I do, however, have evidence that there are more of these waterholes than just the bottomless pond and Skull Lake. Another example we can see of this is more clearly under Spectacle Rock by the Gerudo Desert. We can see how one of these chambers has broken open, and how the interior of this wall has been filled with water. There may be others around the map that also do this. This is merely one that I came upon and made note of. Now let's go back to Lake Mabe. Consider that under Lake Mabe is one of these water holes. We don't know why it is there or how it correlates to the surface, but for the moment, let's assume that it has always been there. I would point out that the depths are not a perfect reflection of the surface. There are sections that have huge chunks ripped away for the sake of basically a boss encounter. Anyhow, the Hylians needed the dirt to fill in the Astral Observatory. They collected it and carted it off to the castle. As they dug deeper, they may have breached into something unexpected, and ended up finding water coming up from the depths. they would continue to break away around the edges of this pool, collecting all the dirt that they wanted, while eventually the water would fill up to the rim from this water source. That rim would match the wall in the depths near perfectly. Though the Hylians would be unaware of the depths specifically at this point, they probably would have just assumed that it was an underground water source, nothing special. And there you have it, a new lake added to the surface. With that said, I think I've crafted a rather compelling explanation as to why this new lake came into existence. It explains a motive, the means, and justifies the shape in connection to the wall we see in the depths. Now, let's talk about the real reason for Lake Mabe, the meta reason. The real reason. Stories are about the journey, the set pieces, and the struggles along the way. At the end of the game, the crowning moment is when Link is diving to catch Zelda, his arm outstretched mirroring the start of the game. I feel that these two deserve a happy ending, though I would have liked a certain transformation to be a bit less Deus Ex Machina. I digress. It seems clear that the inclusion of the lake was because they wanted this moment. They wanted Link to catch Zelda, crash into a body of water, and wade out of it holding her, basically like every hero fantasy out there. You can criticize the game for making Zelda a damsel again if you want, but this scene is nice. It has a really nice view, showing off Death Mountain, the castle, and Lookout Landing. This is likely the real reason why they, the game developers, put Lake Mabe here. Had they done it at the Bottomless Pond, it would have placed them by the Great Sky Island, and that wouldn't have fit as well for the final battle. In fact, Hyrule Field is mysteriously devoid of sky ruins. Unusual, isn't it? Maybe it all fell during the onslaught of the upheaval. What's important is that this space was clearly made so the final battle could happen with no sky chunks around. The lake was created for Link and Zelda to fall into. That is the real reason why it was created. Remember, Nintendo likes to spout gameplay first and story second. Everything I've tried to justify before this, that is me filling in the gaps for something that ought to have been explained in the game somewhere. I love this game, but its lack of explanation for basic things like the Hylians apparently digging a new lake drives me crazy. And that is all I have to say on the topic. Thanks for making it to the end of the video, guys. If you have any thoughts on the creation of Lake Mabe, why it suddenly came into existence, or maybe feel that I'm just wrong, let me know in the comments below. But be respectful about it. If you haven't done so already, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. It really helps things out. For those of you who can spare a little more, consider subscribing to my Patreon or becoming a channel member. I'm trying to make this my life, and that support will go a long ways. Joining up will not only get you a shout out, but have your name listed with all these other supporters at the bottom, as well as give you access to my Discord where we can talk more directly. I'm always eager to talk about Zelda stuff. I think I'm going to start offering early access for my supporters as well, so keep that in mind. Anyhow, that's all I got for you today. Be safe and may the way of the hero lead to the Triforce.